actions of different types against different countries. The three examples that we're going to be talking about today are Colombia, Venezuela, and Cuba. And just a little housekeeping note, most of you probably know and are familiar with La Pena, but in case you're not, there's bathrooms down this hallway here. And the format for today is we're going to have three individual speakers, and each one will talk for more or less 20 minutes, and then we'll have half an hour, 40 minutes for Q&A and more of a panel type presentation. But we look forward to your questions after the presentations today. And first up, we've got Angela Marino. She's a professor at UC Berkeley, specializing in Latin American and Caribbean studies. Her publications include Populism and Performance in the Bolivarian Revolution of Venezuela, and a recent article published by Latin American Perspectives that detailed some of the untold story about pro-Maduro activists and artists who are resisting the U.S.-provoked violence in their country. So please give a warm welcome to Angela Marino.
Thank you. Buenas tardes. Right. ¿Cómo estamos? Bien. Are we ready to resist U.S. imperialism? Let's do it. Okay, so we've got a presentation with just 28.6 million people in Venezuela. And the size of the country is the size of Washington, Oregon, and California combined. Just about. That. Background conditions and analysis is what we'll go through today. I want to say first, this is a mural that's at the coast, the Afro-Venezolana coast of the Caribbean. And it's a place where Simón Bolívar in 1816 came from Haiti with the forces from Haiti to make the revolution in Venezuela. So to begin, let us remember that the Haitian Revolution made it possible for Simón Bolívar to organize a revolution of independence of the South. By abolishing slavery, it was Haiti that stood firm in their independence, their support, and as a powerful safe haven for revolutionaries of the world. So when we speak of the dream of Bolívar that inspired Hugo Chavez and the people of Venezuela to unify South America and the Caribbean against imperialism, to free Haiti is to free us all. Venezuela and the Fourth Republic, this is before Chavez. What did the people of Venezuela face? A two-party locked system, some variations of that. Widespread corruption and state repression under a fake democracy, supported by Washington and the Miami far right. Sound familiar? Yes. Like Cuba, before the revolution, the majority poor, 76%, were seeing extreme inequality. The majority had no access to health, education, to housing. State terror was rampant prior to Chavez. It's something that's often ignored, where we think of Argentina and Chile, but we forget that there was a dirty war of violence that the state exerted on people just like us, activists, students, artists, cultural makers and producers. Disappearances and prison abuse was common. Like Cuba, we saw massacres. The Cantaura massacre, El Amparo massacre, the Yumare massacre, in addition to the Caracazo that maybe some of you have heard of. Thousands of people were killed. And what did the U.S. do? Condoned it. Exactly. Venezuela, Fifth Republic. So Hugo Chavez wins in 1998, brings power in, Fifth Republic. Communes, comunas, are at the heart of the participatory democracy in the country. They are rich in ways to create and sustain mutual well-being. Neighborhood collectives, they have direct access to the Banco Funda Comunal. So this is the oil resources that are put into a bank, and all of these thousands of collectives have direct access to these ingresos so that they can build their projects. Sanctions. that began in really intensifying in the mid-2010s. First half of what we now know as the Bolivarian Revolution, before that, saw twofold reversal of the poverty index. And all of that started to slow in the strangulation of the economy through the sanctions regime. And that is the economic coercive measures. We think of sanctions and we're thinking of, oh, that's like something to help guard something bad from happening. No, it was economic coercion and gunpoint politics. Key to participatory power is the Constituent Assembly. There was 12 times more representation than in the US in the Constituent Assembly. 545 members of this body. And there are seats for farmers, for students, for disabled folks, for workers. And so what we're looking at in this idea of dictatorship doesn't look a lot like dictatorship when you see the increased representation that people actually have to move their projects and advance their work from poverty to real social programs. Things like sewing and textile cooperatives, food and agricultural collectives, arts and education, services in health and transportation that matter. And of course we know who helped with the medical aid? Cuba! The Cubanos were there right from the outset, starting to create dental clinics and medical clinics. There's also, this is taken in January, ecological collectives that are transforming plastics into playground furniture. And what you're seeing here in the middle are fisherwomen that are making a kind of salsa out of their fish foodstuffs and trading it and selling it as a part of their own sustainability and autonomy. This is a tram car that goes up into the hills where it's very difficult to walk up those long hills after you've been working all day long. And so the tram car is practically free, less than about a penny. And it brings people up into the hillside and provides that transportation that's so needed. Organized popular power. Now I know you probably can't read that. Can you read that back there? No. Okay. We don't have glasses that good. But I'm going to read this for you. So, street level activism is one important component. Speaker systems at each intersection, organized sectors in the rallies, block by block, promoted through media in the workplace. And the reason I'm saying this is because what they've been able to develop in terms of an infrastructure for popular power are all things that we can learn from here, right? We could be doing this more. We set up spaces through our popular rallies. We make people feel they belong. We bring music, we bring arts, we bring the action. Local workplace and neighborhood communes is a very important place for organizing. There are tens of thousands of communes that are local, informed, and responsive to what's happening in their country. Mutual aid and autonomy is at the grassroots level, trading food and knowledge. There are universities inside the collectives, inside the communes, because they realize that the problem solving has to start from where the problems are. And from there you build up what the knowledge is that you need. And they ask for experts and they find each other how they need in order to solve those problems. Media networks is the last point on this slide. Media is crucial. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, about the narrative and deception that happens to confuse us. Analysis and information is shared at a national level with humanist, not capitalist values. Popular power at the base right now in Venezuela is very strong. That's what I saw in January when I was there. Many, many people have been talking about this and saying this. They are seeing their communes and their collective culture thrive. However, their government is being held at gunpoint. This is a very critical time. I'm going to move to conditions. This says, the U.S. hybrid war against Venezuela has been happening for 25 years, from lawfare, internal violence and sabotage, to the bombing of Caracas on January 3rd. Ana Maldonado, who is part of the Frente Miranda, Francisco Miranda, this is the shirt that I'm wearing is from the Francisco Miranda Frente. She says, attacking Venezuela serves two purposes: to loot our resources and to extinguish the example of participatory democracy. This is crucial. For more on the communes, I would highly recommend to see the work of Cira, Pascual Marquina, and Chris Gilbert. They've been doing incredible work, very detailed on the communes. If you want any references, let me know after, and I'm happy to provide. So what has been happening leading up to this in conditions? In February of 2014, a teenager named Elvis Rafael Duran de la Rosa was decapitated. Did you hear about someone being decapitated who was a pro-government supporter? Did you hear about that? Interesting. Coordinated protesters tied wires across the street, targeting the moto taxis. Why? It's not a coincidence that the mototaxista union pledged their support for the government and the social reforms. Mainstream and even progressive news has not captured the nature of this extreme violence. This is a January 6th on steroids. It's destroyed school buses, hospitals, public offices, and marketplaces. Gunmen spurred by Maria Corina Machado and the Miami far right have shot government supporters point blank, blamed it on the government. A crowd burned a black man alive on the streets because he was accused of being a government supporter. This has been proven. People on the ground in Venezuela know this, but we don't know it here. We're not seeing it here. So these are also not being addressed by our NGOs. It's not being adequately reported, and it's being blamed on the government, even when the investigations are showing on the ground that it was coming from right-wing fascist violence on the street that wants to stop the democratic process from happening. Does it sound familiar to Cuba? Yeah. So, does anybody see that title there? Do you know what that refers to? We know Sal Landau's film, Will the Real Terrorists Please Stand Up, about the right-wing violence by Cuban Americans and Cubans in exile who have committed acts of terrorism against the Cuban people for many, many years. Of course, this famous film is being referred to, on the one hand, to show how insidious the disinformation and erasure has been and how we must fight for the truth. And two, to show how U.S. officials and sponsored leaders are waist deep in narco relationships themselves. This is a game of reversal. What we're really seeing here is Juan Guaido, the puppet, who is caught on camera with the Colombian narco. I mean, that's... Marco Rubio and Juan Orlando Hernandez have a long, close relationship. It's been entirely ignored by the press. And we know that Juan Orlando Hernandez was not only indicted, he was convicted and then pardoned by Trump. So of course we need to contest this and question the so-called truth that they're trying to promote. January 3rd, bombing of Caracas. This is what we see is the last act of empire, and let's say it was the January 3rd act of empire and not the last act of empire, right? Revolutionary leadership was kidnapped, illegally abducted, and the world courts are yet to respond. Let's move to analysis. There's a geopolitical remixing that's happening right now, and it is why the United States is bringing force to the game. In April of 2023, there was a conference which sought a new form of policy, which is good neighbor policy, that can rid the Monroe Doctrine from the U.S. foreign policy altogether. It brought people from all sectors of the United States, and there are things to learn from that conference. I invite you to look it up and find a way so that we can continue to forge and build the way forward for a different kind of foreign policy. Vijay Prashad wrote, quote, "For the first time in over 600 years, there is now a credible economic and political alternative to the domination of world affairs by the Europeans and their descendant white settler colonial states. First is the socialist grouping led by China. Second are the growing aspirations for national sovereignty, economic modernization, and multilateralism emerging from the global South. These are the connections that the United States is trying to destroy." We're also seeing that it's not just the Monroe Doctrine, and I don't know what the Donroe Doctrine is, but to me it's kind of like a Dune Doctrine. That's what I'm thinking of it. PSYOP's hybrid war is flipping reality and trying to convince us of something that is absolutely the reverse of what is true. And that, if we can continue to recognize that this idea of so-called peace that Maria Corina Machado marketed to the world was really a fairly clear plunder for spice. Are you all following me with that? Yeah? Okay. Ask your neighbor if you're not sure about what the... Of course, there's much more detail than that in the Dune, and I'm not going 100% into that as metaphor. I'm just... Also, I want to mention Maria Corina Machado and her rally supporters were in a crowd chanting racist comments about Delcy. It is a racist movement. So when we're talking about what the kind of white internationalist movement right now, that's no joke. So thinking about what this elite between the Venezuelan exile community, Cuban community, exile community, that is an important factor for us to recognize. I want to bring it to the ordinary folks. I want to bring it to some people who are talking. This is Miguel, an arts photographer, at a space just like La Pena in Caracas. And he said, quote, "They tried to invent ways on how to bring us down. Coups and oil strikes, sanctions. None of that worked. There were no traitors in the ranks. So they resorted to force. This is what marks the before and the after January 3rd. Alejandra, who's a college instructor, and she said she was a witness to it. It happened right at her apartment building. She said, "The explosion was the kind of sound that haunts you over and again because it was so unnatural. The drones were over our heads like a roulette. I said goodbye to my son because I thought that night that we were going to die." And Salvador, the young artist, her son, drew a picture here, and it says "Sueños Bolivarianos," as Bolivarian dreams. This present moment, the state is continuing to engage all processes to build peace, including face-to-face mediation with victims. They have literally the gun to their head, and we must do something about it by raising our emphatic demands at all levels to end the sanctions, for fair trade, and for peace. I want to pause here one moment so that we think about where we are situated in this. What is our role here in the middle of the state of California, in the middle of the coast of the Pacific, the economic engine of the United States that fuels this empire? What possibilities do we have being here in this place to rethink what the geopolitical order could be? Let us build a Pacific zone of peace. This is a crucial moment, says Dave Udala. This is a crucial moment in the history of our region and indeed of the world. Silence is not an option. Thank you.